A German shepherd stood frozen beside a rusted steel hatch in the middle of the Arizona desert, and the veteran holding a $5 bill suddenly realized his uncle had been hiding something for decades. The metal hatch slammed shut behind him with a deep clang that echoed through the canyon walls. Boone barked once, then started digging furiously at the rocky ground, throwing dust into the hot desert air. Caleb's fingers tightened around the worn $5 bill as a cold breeze drifted out from somewhere beneath the earth. What his dog had found out there made no sense at all. What do you think Boone was trying to show him? The rain started before dawn and never really stopped. By the time Caleb Mercer parked his aging Ford pickup outside Martin Graves' law office in Peace, Arizona, the sky looked like a sheet of hammered steel stretched across the mountains. He sat behind the wheel for a moment longer than necessary. His hands rested at 10 and 2. Not because he needed to drive, because old habits stayed. 20 years after Iraq, he still took a second to study every building before entering it. The front door, the side alley, the windows, possible exits, possible problems. Then he sighed, grabbed his hat from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the cold rain. At 68 years old, Caleb moved slower than he once had. But there was still something military in the way he carried himself. His back remained straight, his eyes never stopped working. The brass bell above the office door chimed when he entered. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. His family was already there. That alone made him uneasy. His cousin, Linda Mercer, sat near the window, dressed in black, but wearing enough jewelry to reflect the room's light. Across from her sat Derek Mercer, 43, expensive watch, expensive boots, the kind of smile that always looked like it was negotiating something. Beside him sat his younger brother, Kyle. Kyle was scrolling through his phone, barely pretending to care about the occasion. Caleb took the last empty chair. Nobody greeted him. That was fine. Families got strange around inheritances, especially this family, especially after Raymond died. Uncle Raymond Mercer had been gone 11 days, a heart attack, quick, quiet, the way Raymond probably would have wanted. Caleb still couldn't quite accept it. His uncle had always seemed permanent, like the mountains, like the desert, like the old oak tree behind his cabin. Some things simply weren't supposed to disappear. Yet, here they were. Gone, the office door open. Martin Graves appeared, tall, silver-haired, pressed suit, the same attorney Raymond had used for nearly 30 years. "Please come in." The family rose. The conference room was small. A long wooden table occupied most of the space. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Nobody spoke. Martin opened a folder, adjusted his glasses, and began. The legal language came first, formalities, statements, dates, signatures. Caleb barely listened. His attention drifted toward the rain, toward memories, toward a summer nearly 50 years ago, when Raymond had taught him how to bait a fishing line. Toward another summer, when Raymond showed him how to rebuild a carburetor. Toward a winter after Iraq, when Raymond sat silently beside him for 3 straight hours because Caleb couldn't stop shaking. No advice, no lectures, just presence. Raymond had always known when words helped and when they didn't. "To my niece, Linda Mercer." Caleb focused again. Martin continued. "The residence located on Cedar Ridge Road, together with all associated structures and contents." Linda's eyes widened. She quickly hid her smile. "Failed the house. Raymond's house, gone, just like that," Martin continued. "To my nephew Kyle Mercer, a cash amount. Substantial." Kyle finally looked up from his phone. For the first time all morning. Then came Derek, Raymond's vintage Ford truck, the one he spent years restoring. Derek nodded once, satisfied, as if confirming a business transaction. Caleb sat quietly. None of it bothered him. Not really. He didn't want the house. He didn't want the money. He didn't want the truck. But somewhere deep inside he expected something. A tool, a watch, a letter, a photograph, anything. Something that said, "You mattered." Something that acknowledged all those years. The summers, the repairs, the fishing trips, the nights sitting on the porch after Iraq when sleep refused to come. Something. Martin turned another page, then paused. The room seemed to shrink. Even the rain outside felt quieter. Caleb noticed Martin looking directly at him. Not long, just long enough. Then the attorney lowered his eyes back to the document. "To my nephew, Caleb Mercer." The room went still. Caleb straightened slightly. "I leave the sum of $5. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For one strange second, Caleb thought he had heard wrong. $5. Surely there was more. There wasn't. Martin reached into a drawer, removed a small envelope, and slid it across the table. Caleb stared at it. $5. After everything. After all those years. After being the only family member who actually visited. The only one who fixed Raymond's fences. The only one who drove him to doctor appointments. The only one who showed up. $5. Across the table, Derek lowered his eyes, trying not to smile. Linda looked away. Kyle suddenly became fascinated by the grain pattern in the wood. Nobody said anything, which somehow felt worse. Caleb picked up the envelope. His fingers felt strangely numb. Inside sat a single worn $5 bill, folded neatly. Nothing else. The room blurred for a second, not from tears, from shock. Raymond? $5. It didn't fit. It made no sense. Not Raymond, not the man Caleb knew. The old soldier inside him immediately began searching for explanations, hidden meanings, missing information, anything. But all he found was silence. Martin finished the reading. More paperwork followed. Signatures, questions, discussions about property taxes, probate, selling assets. Voices drifted around him like distant radio chatter. Caleb barely heard them. Eventually he stood, placed the envelope inside his jacket, and walked toward the door. No one stopped him. No one called after him. Outside, rain soaked the parking lot. Cold mountain air hit his face. He crossed to his truck, opened the driver's door, sat down, closed it. Silence. For several seconds, he simply stared through the windshield. The rain distorted the world. He suddenly remembered being 22 years old, standing in the Arizona heat, a younger Raymond handing him a wrench. "Learn something useful," his uncle had said. "Nobody can take useful away from you." Caleb swallowed hard. His throat hurt. $5. The old wound opened deeper than he expected, not because of the money, because of what it seemed to mean. The envelope rested on the passenger seat. After a long moment, he opened it again, pulled out the bill. This time, something slipped free. A second piece of paper, small, folded, hidden beneath the money. Caleb frowned, unfolded it. 3 words appeared in Raymond's familiar handwriting. Block letters, steady, certain. "You'll understand in 60 days. Caleb stared at the message. Rain hammered the windshield. Somewhere, far away, thunder rolled through the mountains. And for the first time all day, the confusion became something else. A question. Because Raymond Mercer had never done anything without a reason. The note stayed folded inside Caleb's wallet for the next 8 weeks. He carried it everywhere, to the machine shop, to the grocery store, to church on Sundays, though he rarely listened to the sermon anymore. Sometimes he would pull it out and stare at the words. "You'll understand in 60 days. Then he would put it away again, and understand nothing. Spring settled slowly over the mountains surrounding Mogollon Rim. Patches of snow disappeared from the shadows. The pines grew greener. The mornings became warmer. But inside Caleb's cabin, time felt stuck. The little place sat alone among juniper trees and weathered rock formations, miles from the nearest town. It was quiet. Too quiet, some people would say. Caleb preferred it that way. Most days, most nights were different. The first nightmare came 3 days after the reading of the will. He woke suddenly, heart pounding, breathing hard, his hand already reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. For a brief second, he wasn't in Arizona. He was back in Iraq. Dust, heat, A convoy stalled outside Fallujah, the distant crack of gunfire, the radio screaming, "Contact front, contact front." Then reality returned, dark cabin, cold sheets, silence, except for the sound of claws on wood. A large shape appeared beside the bed, Boone. The German shepherd placed his front paws against the mattress and rested his head beside Caleb's arm. The dog said nothing. He didn't need to. Caleb slowly lowered his shaking hand. "Yeah," he whispered. "I'm here." Boone's tail thumped once. Mission accomplished. The dog settled beside the bed, guarding, watching. The same way he always did. Boone was 10 years old now. His muzzle had begun turning gray. Scars crossed his shoulders beneath thick black and tan fur. The dog had spent years detecting explosives for military units overseas, before eventually entering a veterans assistance program. Then somehow he'd ended up with Caleb. The best thing that had happened to either of them. Most mornings began the same way: coffee, silence, the smell of pine drifting through open windows. Boone lying on the porch, watching deer move through the trees. Then work. Caleb repaired tractors, harvesters, old diesel engines, anything farmers dragged into his shop. Machines made sense. People rarely did. Machines broke for reasons. Machines followed rules. People left $5 inheritances and notes nobody could explain. One afternoon, while rebuilding a transmission housing, Caleb caught himself staring at the folded note again. Hollis Turner, owner of the repair shop, noticed immediately. "You keep reading that thing." Caleb shrugged. "Habit. Looks more like a problem. Maybe." Hollis wiped grease from his hands. Raymond wasn't the type to play games. "No. Then maybe stop thinking about the $5. Caleb gave a dry laugh. "Hard not to." Hollis nodded. "Fair point." The conversation ended there. Most conversations did. The weeks passed. The loneliness deepened. Not because Caleb missed money. Because he missed certainty. Every memory of Raymond now carried a question attached to it. A fishing trip. A lesson. A conversation. Everything seemed different. Had he misunderstood the old man all these years? One night in late April, thunder rolled across the mountains. A branch scraped against the side of the cabin. The sudden sound snapped Caleb awake. Before he was fully conscious, he was already moving. Out of bed, low posture, eyes scanning, his body clearing corners before his mind caught up. Boone was already standing at the bedroom door. Alert, ears forward, the dog watched Caleb carefully. Not alarmed, watching, waiting. Caleb stopped, looked around. No threat, just wind, just Arizona. Not Iraq, not Baghdad, not Ramadi. The realization arrived slowly, like surfacing from deep water. He exhaled. Boone approached, pressed his shoulder against Caleb's leg, grounding him, pulling him back. Again, the dog had become better at it than any therapist. The next morning, Caleb found himself sitting on the porch before sunrise, coffee steaming in his hands. Boone beside him. The mountains glowed faint blue beneath the coming dawn. Birds stirred among the pines. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Then Caleb remembered the date. Day 57. Only 3 days left. He didn't know why that mattered, but suddenly it did. Every hour felt heavier after that. Day 58. Nothing. Day 59. Nothing. The anticipation became irritating, then strange, then impossible to ignore. On the morning of day 60, Caleb woke before dawn. No nightmare, no thunder, no flashback, just a feeling. Boone seemed restless too. The dog paced the cabin twice before breakfast, then sat beside the front window, watching the driveway, waiting. At 11:17, the phone rang. The sound echoed sharply through the cabin. Caleb froze. Boone immediately lifted his head. The old rotary clock above the stove ticked softly. The phone rang again, then a third time. Caleb crossed the room, picked up. "Caleb Mercer," a familiar voice answered. "Mr. Mercer, this is Martin Graves." Caleb's grip tightened. The attorney paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "The 60 days are over." Silence settled between them. Outside, wind moved through the pines. Boone stood and walked closer. Watching, listening, Caleb finally spoke. What happens now? Martin Graves took a slow breath. Your uncle left additional instructions. Caleb felt his pulse quicken. What kind of instructions? Instructions that require a trip. A trip where? I'm afraid I can't tell you over the phone. That immediately bothered him. His military instincts stirred. Questions. Unknown destination. Limited information. None of it felt comfortable. Then tell me what you can. Another pause. Bring water. Caleb frowned. Water? More than you think you'll need. Something about the attorney's tone made Caleb sit straighter. Anything else? Yes. Martin's voice softened slightly. Bring Boone. Caleb looked down at the German shepherd. The dog stared back, completely still, as if he already knew. The attorney continued. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock.
Why Boone?
I'm sorry, Caleb. A pause. Your uncle specifically requested it. The line went quiet. And for the first time in 60 days, Caleb felt something other than anger, something other than grief, something other than confusion, curiosity, real curiosity. Because Raymond Mercer had just reached out from beyond the grave, and somehow, he was asking for Boone, too. Caleb spent the rest of that afternoon trying not to think about it. He failed. The questions followed him everywhere. While he changed the oil in his truck, while he cleaned the cabin, while he filled 2 large water containers and secured them in the truck bed. Why Boone? Of all the things Raymond could have requested, why the dog? The answer refused to come. That night sleep stayed away. Not because of nightmares this time, because of anticipation. At 11:43, Caleb finally gave up and stepped onto the porch. The mountains were dark silhouettes beneath a sky crowded with stars. The air smelled of pine sap and cold stone. Boone followed him outside and settled beside the porch steps. The old German shepherd stared into the darkness. Listening, always listening. Caleb lowered himself into a chair. For a while neither of them moved. A distant coyote called from somewhere deep in the forest. The sound echoed across the canyon. Boone's ears twitched once, then relaxed. Nothing dangerous, just another creature surviving the night. Did you know him better than I did? Caleb asked quietly. Boone glanced up. The dog didn't answer. But for some reason, Caleb smiled. Raymond would have liked that. The old man always said dogs were better listeners than most people. The next morning arrived clear and bright. Arizona sunshine spilled across the mountains. By 7:30, Caleb was already on the road. Boone rode in the passenger seat, head near the window, nose working steadily. The dog seemed unusually alert, as though he sensed something important approaching. At exactly 8 o'clock, Caleb pulled into Martin Graves' office parking lot. The attorney was already waiting. A tan Land Cruiser sat beside the building. Dust covered the lower panels. The vehicle looked prepared for somewhere far beyond paved roads. Martin stepped forward. His expression seemed different today, less professional, more personal, as though carrying a burden he had been holding for a long time. You came. I said I would. The attorney nodded. Then he looked toward Boone. The dog stood beside Caleb's truck, watching. Martin's eyes lingered for a second. He told me the dog would come. Caleb frowned. Raymond said that? Several times. The attorney opened the rear door of the Land Cruiser. Before we leave, there's something I need to give you. From inside a leather satchel, he removed a small wooden box. The wood was old, handmade. Caleb immediately recognized the craftsmanship. Raymond had built it years ago. He used to make boxes like that during winter storms. The sight tightened something in Caleb's chest. Martin handed it over. The box felt heavier than it looked. Inside rested a key, iron, old, hand-forged. Nothing modern about it. A brass tag hung from a small ring. Stamped into the metal was a single number. Caleb stared. The same number. The inheritance, the note, the 60 days, now the key. What does it open? Martin smiled faintly. Your uncle never told me. You're kidding. I assure you, I'm not. The attorney adjusted his jacket. He was very specific about what I could know and what I couldn't. Caleb examined the key again. Years of use had polished parts of the metal smooth. Someone had carried it for a long time, maybe decades. A strange feeling settled over him, like standing on the edge of a trail without seeing where it led. "Where are we going?" he asked. Martin looked toward the distant horizon. "North." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give." Caleb didn't like that. His military instincts disliked unknowns. Unknown destinations, unknown objectives, unknown timelines. The old training whispered automatically. Gather information, identify terrain, determine threats, yet none of those options seemed available. Martin climbed into the driver's seat. "Bring your water." Caleb loaded the containers. Boone jumped into the back without being asked. The dog settled immediately, ready, as if he'd received orders. The first hour passed quietly. The road wound through pine-covered mountains. Small towns appeared and disappeared. Gas stations, feed stores, weathered churches. Civilization slowly thinned behind them. Eventually, the forests began giving way to open country. Red rock, dry washes, mesas rising against the sky. The terrain became harsher, more isolated, less forgiving. By noon, they were far beyond any place Caleb recognized. Cell service disappeared, GPS lost signal. The screen displayed nothing but a blank map. That bothered him too, Martin noticed. "Your uncle picked this route himself." "When?" 3 years ago. Caleb looked over sharply. 3 years? Martin nodded. He planned every step. The statement hung in the vehicle. 3 years. Raymond had expected this. Expected his own death. Expected Caleb's arrival. Expected Boone. The realization made the world feel slightly off balance. They continued westward. The road eventually narrowed into gravel, then dirt, then something barely deserving the name road at all. Boone suddenly stood. The dog moved forward between the seats, his ears locked onto something ahead. His nose lifted into the air, testing the wind. Caleb immediately noticed. "What is it, buddy?" Boone didn't respond. He remained focused on the horizon, watching, listening, the same way he used to watch for danger, the same way Caleb had seen him do countless times. The dog wasn't nervous. He wasn't threatened. He was interested. Very interested. Martin glanced into the mirror. He started doing that the last mile every time. Caleb turned toward him. "Every time? Every trip Raymond brought me out here." The attorney slowed the vehicle. A low ridge appeared ahead. Nothing but rock and scrub brush. Empty country. At least it looked empty. Then they crested the rise, and Caleb saw it. A steel gate, massive, weathered, standing alone in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no roads, no signs. Just a gate where no gate should exist. The hinges gleamed slightly in the sunlight, recently maintained, recently cared for. Boone let out a low sound deep in his throat. Not a growl, not a bark, recognition. Martin stopped the vehicle. The engine went silent. Wind swept across the desert. The attorney looked at Caleb, then at the iron key in his hand. "Your uncle left one final instruction." Caleb waited. Martin smiled softly. "He said you had to be the one who opened it." The desert wind moved across the ridge, carrying dust and the scent of sun-baked stone. For a moment, nobody moved. Caleb stood staring at the gate. The structure looked impossibly out of place. Heavy steel posts, thick chain, a weathered lock hanging in the center. Everything maintained, everything cared for. Yet there was nothing around it. No ranch, no house, no road sign, nothing. Just miles of empty Arizona wilderness. Boone jumped out of the Land Cruiser before Caleb could say a word. The German Shepherd landed lightly and immediately began surveying the area. His nose lifted, testing the air. His ears rotated constantly, gathering information. The same way Caleb used to scan a new AO before stepping into it. The dog wasn't acting nervous. If anything, he seemed focused, purposeful, almost eager. Caleb looked down at the old key in his hand. The brass tag caught the sunlight. Everything kept leading back to that number. He walked toward the gate, boots crunching against gravel. The closer he got, the stranger the place felt. Not dangerous, just hidden. As though somebody had spent decades making sure nobody stumbled across it by accident. His eyes moved automatically. Ridgeline, approach routes, dry washes, natural cover. Years of military training still ran quietly beneath everything he did. You never stopped observing. Not completely. The lock was old, much older than he expected. The metal showed age, but almost no rust. Someone had oiled it recently. Caleb inserted the key. For a second, nothing happened. Then the mechanism turned smoothly, like it had been waiting. The chain slipped free. A metallic clink echoed through the silence. Boone immediately stepped closer, tail still, body alert. The gate swung open without a sound, no squeak, no resistance, perfectly maintained. Caleb felt a strange chill despite the heat. Raymond had planned this, not just the inheritance. Not just the 60 days, every detail, every step. Martin approached quietly. Your uncle came here at least 4 times a year. Caleb turned. You brought him? The attorney nodded. Sometimes more. Why didn't anybody know? Martin smiled faintly. Because nobody ever asked where he disappeared to. That answer landed harder than Caleb expected. It sounded exactly like Raymond. Simple, accurate, painful. People had spent years assuming the old man did nothing. Nobody bothered looking closer. Beyond the gate stretched a narrow dirt road winding between sandstone formations. The track disappeared into a fold in the earth. From where Caleb stood, he couldn't see more than a quarter-mile ahead. Only red rock, shadows, and sky, a lot of sky. Martin motioned toward the vehicle. We still have a few miles. They climbed back inside. Boone settled into the rear seat, but remained standing, watching. The Land Cruiser rolled forward. The gate closed behind them. Something about that sound felt important. Like crossing a border. The road narrowed, twisting deeper into the desert. Towering cliffs rose on both sides. Ancient layers of stone glowed orange beneath the afternoon sun. Occasionally Caleb spotted petroglyphs carved into rock faces. Evidence of people who had walked this land centuries before. Then even those disappeared. Nothing remained except wilderness. The farther they traveled, the more Boone changed. The dog moved constantly now, from one window to another, sniffing, studying. At one point he pressed his nose against the glass and remained frozen, focused on something beyond the ridge. What does he smell? Caleb asked. Martin shook his head. I stopped trying to guess years ago. Boone let out a low whine. Not fear, recognition. Caleb noticed it immediately. The same sound Boone sometimes made when greeting old friends. The same sound he made when recognizing familiar scents. But that made no sense. The dog had never been here. At least Caleb thought he hadn't. A few miles later, the terrain suddenly changed. The canyon widened. The cliffs opened. Sunlight flooded the valley ahead. Martin slowed the vehicle, then stopped. Caleb leaned forward and forgot how to breathe. Green. The first thing he noticed was green. Not desert green, not cactus green, real green. Cottonwood trees, grass, shadows moving across leaves, life. An entire valley hidden inside the desert. Water flashed in the distance. A ribbon of silver winding through the center. Birds circled overhead. The contrast was so dramatic it felt impossible. Moments earlier they had been surrounded by rock and dust. Now they were looking at something alive, something thriving. Boone barked once, a sharp sound. The first bark he'd made all day. The dog pushed toward the door, excited, almost impatient. Martin switched off the engine. Silence settled over the valley. Then Caleb heard it. Water, running water, steady, constant. Real. In Arizona, that sound alone could change lives. What is this place? Caleb whispered. The attorney stared out the windshield. Even after years of visiting, the view still seemed to affect him. Finally, he answered. The reason your uncle left you $5. Caleb looked at him. Martin smiled, then pointed toward the valley floor. A large adobe-style house sat nestled among the trees. Nearby stood several long structures covered with gleaming solar panels. Gardens stretched across the lower terraces. Fruit trees lined irrigation channels. Everything carefully planned, carefully maintained. An entire hidden world. And somehow, it belonged to Raymond Mercer. Boone suddenly jumped from the vehicle the moment Caleb opened the door. The German shepherd landed in the grass, then froze, his ears lifted. His nose turned toward the northern ridge overlooking the valley. Not the house, not the water, the ridge. Something had captured his full attention, something unseen. The dog stared for several long seconds, then slowly started walking toward it, as if following a trail only he could sense. Boone. The German shepherd didn't stop. Caleb exchanged a glance with Martin Graves and then followed. The grass beneath his boots felt wrong. Not bad, just unexpected. After hours of dust, stone, and desert scrub, stepping onto living grass felt like stepping into another state entirely. A cool breeze drifted across the valley. Cottonwood leaves whispered overhead. Somewhere nearby, water moved over stone. The sound pulled at old memories. Fishing trips, mountain streams, childhood summers, Raymond. Everything here felt impossible, and yet it was real. Boone continued toward the northern side of the valley, before finally stopping near a small rise overlooking the property. The dog stood perfectly still, studying, watching. Then he slowly sat down. Whatever had captured his attention seemed to satisfy him for now. Caleb walked over, rested a hand on the dog's neck. Boone's muscles felt relaxed, alert but relaxed. Not danger. Something else. Something Caleb couldn't understand. He's done that before, Martin said quietly. When? The first time your uncle brought him. Caleb turned sharply. What? Martin nodded. About 4 years ago. The statement hit him like a cold splash of water. Boone was here? Once? Why, I wasn't told, of course. That answer was becoming familiar. Raymond had apparently left half the state under instructions not to explain anything. Martin gestured toward the house. Come on. The adobe structure sat near the center of the valley. As they approached, Caleb noticed details that made the entire place even more astonishing. Stone irrigation channels carried spring water through orchards, apple trees, peach trees, rows of vegetables. Solar panels stretched across a southern slope, hundreds of them. The entire valley had been engineered, planned, maintained, built with extraordinary patience. For 30 years, maybe longer, the realization made Caleb slow down. How much of Raymond's life had happened without anyone knowing? How many weekends? How many summers? How many years? His family thought Raymond spent his life repairing fences and tinkering with old equipment. Meanwhile, he had built a hidden oasis in the middle of Arizona. The front door opened with a simple brass key. Cool air greeted them. The interior smelled faintly of cedar, old books, dust, and something else, kerosene. The scent instantly transported Caleb backward. A younger version of himself, sitting across from Raymond on stormy nights, listening to rain hit a cabin roof while a kerosene lamp glowed on the table. His throat tightened unexpectedly. The house wasn't luxurious. That wasn't Raymond's style. But everything inside had purpose. Every tool hung exactly where it belonged. Every shelf had been organized. Every room felt used, lived in, loved. Martin led him into a study. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Engineering manuals, agricultural journals, military history, water management, solar design. The collection alone represented decades of learning. At the center of the room sat a heavy wooden desk. On top rested a single envelope. Caleb stopped. His name was written across the front, in Raymond's handwriting. For a moment, neither man spoke. Outside, wind moved softly through the cottonwoods. Martin finally stepped back. I'll give you some privacy. Then he quietly left the room. The door closed. Caleb stood alone. His eyes remained fixed on the envelope. After everything that had happened, the $5, the 60 days, the hidden gate, the valley, the house, now this. Slowly he crossed the room. The chair behind the desk creaked as he sat. The same chair Raymond had probably occupied hundreds of times. Maybe thousands. Caleb carefully picked up the envelope. The paper felt worn, handled, prepared long ago. His fingers hesitated before breaking the seal. Part of him suddenly wasn't ready. What if the answers hurt? What if they changed everything again? Boone entered quietly and settled beside the desk, close enough for his shoulder to touch Caleb's leg. The dog looked up, waiting. Caleb smiled faintly. "Yeah," he murmured. "Let's find out." Inside were several handwritten pages. The first line immediately blurred his vision, not because he couldn't read it, because he recognized Raymond's voice in every word. "Caleb, if you're reading this, you found the valley. Good. That means you were patient enough to wait, and stubborn enough to come. Both qualities matter." Caleb swallowed hard. The words felt alive, like the old man was sitting across from him. The letter continued. "What you're looking at took me 32 years. Most people spend their lives chasing money. I spent mine chasing water." The second page described springs, underground aquifers, land purchases, solar projects, decades of work. Every paragraph revealed another layer of Raymond's secret life. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why? Why build all of this? Why hide it? Why leave $5? Then Caleb reached the final page. There, near the bottom, another sentence waited. A sentence that made him look down at Boone. "The rest of what I need you to know isn't in this house. It never was. Trust Boone. He'll take you to it." Caleb stared at the words, then at the dog. Boone simply stared back, calm, patient, as if he'd been expecting this moment all along. Outside the study window, shadows stretched across the valley floor. The afternoon sun dipped lower behind the cliffs, and somewhere beyond the northern ridge, something waited. Something Raymond had hidden even deeper than the valley itself. Something Boone already seemed to know about. Caleb read the last line 3 more times. Then a fourth. The words never changed. "Trust Boone." Simple, direct. Exactly the way Raymond always spoke. No explanations, no instructions, just trust. Outside, the afternoon sun drifted lower across the valley. Long shadows stretched beneath the cottonwoods. Boone stood before Caleb could say anything. The German shepherd looked toward the door, then back at him, then toward the door again, waiting. Caleb folded the letter carefully. "All right." The dog's ears lifted immediately. "You've got a plan?" Boone turned and walked from the room. Not running, not excited. Purposeful. The way working dogs moved when they believed they understood an assignment. Caleb followed him outside. The valley looked even more beautiful in the late afternoon light. Water glimmered through the trees. Birds moved among the orchard rows. Somewhere beyond the garden, bees hummed lazily around flowering plants. For a moment, it was hard to imagine this place existing in secret for 30 years. Boone ignored all of it. He headed directly toward the northern ridge, the same place that had captured his attention earlier. Caleb noticed Martin watching from the porch. The attorney smiled. "Looks like he knows where he's going. Looks that way. Raymond always trusted that dog." Caleb paused. "What do you mean?" Martin hesitated, then shook his head. "Just something he used to say." Before Caleb could ask another question, Boone barked once from farther up the slope. Not impatient. Calling, Caleb started climbing. The terrain changed quickly. The lush valley floor gave way to rough stone and scrub brush. Loose rock shifted beneath his boots. The climb wasn't difficult, but at 68, it demanded more effort than it once would have. Boone stayed 20 yards ahead, always looking back, always making sure Caleb followed. The dog eventually stopped beside a rocky shelf overlooking the valley. Then he began sniffing, methodically, back and forth, left, right, circles. The behavior immediately caught Caleb's attention. Boone wasn't exploring. He was searching, working the same pattern he used during detection assignments. Caleb remembered watching him perform similar searches years earlier. Different environment, Same focus, same precision. For nearly 20 minutes, Boone worked the area. Then he stopped beside a cluster of boulders. His nose pressed against the ground. His tail stiffened. He began digging. Dirt flew behind him, fast, aggressive, determined. Caleb approached. "What'd you find?" Boone didn't look up. The digging continued. After several minutes, Caleb crouched beside him. Nothing, just dirt, roots, small stones. No scent Caleb could recognize, no obvious clue. Eventually, the sun dipped lower, shadows thickened. The desert air cooled. Boone finally stopped, panting heavily. The hole was nearly 2 feet deep, still nothing. Caleb scratched behind the dog's ears. Maybe tomorrow. Boone stared at the hole, unhappy with the suggestion. But he followed Caleb back down the hill. Dinner that night felt strange. The house remained almost unnaturally quiet. Martin had returned to town before sunset, leaving Caleb and Boone alone in the valley. The solitude should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt watchful, as if the valley itself were holding its breath. After dark, Caleb sat on the porch. A lantern glowed softly beside him. The stars overhead seemed impossibly bright. No highways, no towns, no artificial light, just darkness and sky. Boone lay near the steps, at least for a while. Around 10 o'clock, the dog suddenly stood. Every muscle tightened. His head lifted, listening. Caleb noticed immediately. Years of experience had taught him one simple truth. Ignore Boone at your own risk. "What is it?" The dog didn't answer. His gaze remained fixed beyond the orchard, toward the western edge of the property. Caleb slowly rose from his chair. The old instincts surfaced automatically. Observe, assess, don't rush. He switched off the lantern. Darkness swallowed the porch. The valley became silver beneath moonlight. Boone moved forward, silent, focused. Caleb stepped beside a porch post and scanned the terrain. At first he saw nothing, then movement, far away. Near the tree line, a brief silhouette, gone almost immediately. His heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. Combat had taught him strange things. Panic wasted energy, observation saved it. Caleb remained motionless, watching. The figure appeared again, just for a second. Human, definitely human. Too large for a deer, too upright for any animal. Then it disappeared into the darkness. Boone emitted a low growl, deep, warning, not fear. Whoever had been there was now gone. Or hiding. Neither possibility felt comforting. Caleb continued watching for nearly 20 minutes. Nothing else moved. Finally, he exhaled. The valley returned to silence. But sleep came slowly that night. Twice he woke and checked the windows. 3 times he walked the perimeter of the house. By dawn, he had convinced himself of only one thing. Someone else knew this place existed. The realization stayed with him as sunlight crept across the valley. Boone was already awake, waiting by the door. The moment Caleb stepped outside, the dog headed straight toward the northern ridge again. No breakfast, no hesitation. The search mattered more. Caleb followed. The climb felt steeper this morning. Boone reached yesterday's hole and immediately resumed digging. Dirt sprayed backward, rocks rolled downhill. Minutes passed, then 20, then 30. Caleb was about to call him off when Boone suddenly froze. The dog's paw struck something solid. A metallic sound echoed through the morning air. Clang. Boone looked up instantly, then barked, once, sharp, certain. Caleb dropped to one knee beside the hole, carefully brushed away loose dirt. His fingers touched cold metal. Not rock, not scrap, metal, something buried. Something Raymond had hidden beneath the hillside. And judging by Boone's expression, something the dog had been trying to show him all along. Caleb brushed away more dirt with both hands. The metal surface widened beneath the soil, flat, man-made, old. Boone stepped back and watched, panting heavily, his tail moving once against the ground. "You stubborn old soldier," Caleb muttered. The dog blinked. For the next hour, man and dog worked together. Caleb fetched a shovel from the equipment shed near the house. The morning sun climbed higher. Sweat darkened his shirt. Dust coated his arms. Slowly, the shape revealed itself. Not scrap metal, not a container, a hatch, heavy steel, nearly 4 feet wide, built into the hillside itself. The sight immediately triggered something familiar. Military engineering, not a bunker exactly, not at first glance, but definitely designed by someone who understood construction. Someone who expected the structure to last. Raymond. The answer seemed obvious now. Boone sat beside the hatch as if guarding it. Caleb knelt and examined the hinges. Despite years underground, they showed surprisingly little corrosion. Someone had protected them, maintained them, prepared them. His pulse quickened. The old anticipation felt strangely similar to approaching a sealed room during deployments overseas. You never knew what waited on the other side. He gripped the handle, pulled, nothing. The hatch didn't move. Then he noticed a small keyhole hidden beneath a metal flap, a familiar shape. His hand slowly drifted toward his pocket, the iron key, the one marked with the number 5. For several seconds he simply stared at it. Then he inserted it into the lock. The mechanism turned immediately. A heavy metallic click echoed beneath the earth. Boone stood, ears forward, watching Caleb pulled again. This time the hatch moved. Dust fell away. The steel door groaned upward. Cool air drifted from below, not stale, not abandoned, cool, dry, preserved. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Caleb switched on a flashlight. The beam cut through shadows, concrete walls, steel supports, an underground structure, far larger than he'd expected. He looked at Boone. The dog was already moving, slowly, confidently, like he had walked this path before. That thought stopped Caleb cold. Had Boone been here? Martin had said Raymond brought him once, 4 years earlier. What exactly had happened during that visit? The staircase descended nearly 20 feet before opening into a large underground chamber. Caleb stopped at the bottom. His flashlight swept across the room, and he forgot to breathe. Maps covered one wall, detailed topographic surveys. Water tables, land boundaries, engineering diagrams. Shelves lined the room, boxes, binders, journals. Decades of records. The center of the chamber held a large work table. Everything organized, everything labeled, everything Raymond. Boone wandered slowly through the room. Not exploring, recognizing. The distinction felt important. Caleb moved toward the nearest shelf. A leather-bound journal rested there. The date on the cover made him pause. Another 30 years of work. Maybe more. He opened one carefully. Raymond's handwriting filled every page. Measurements, rainfall reports, spring output, soil studies, observations, plans, failures, successes. A lifetime of patience preserved in ink. Caleb turned another page, then another. Hours could have disappeared down there, but something else caught his attention. Boot prints, fresh ones. He froze. The flashlight beam lowered toward the concrete floor. Distinct impressions in the dust. Not his, not Martin's, not Raymond's. Recent, very recent. The tracks crossed the room and disappeared into a side corridor. Every muscle in Caleb's body tightened. The sensation was automatic. Old training, old instincts. Observe, assess. Do not panic. Boone immediately noticed the change. The German shepherd moved beside him. Silent, alert. Caleb crouched. The prints couldn't have been more than a few days old. Maybe less. His flashlight followed them. One person. Possibly male. Work boots. Size 11 or 12. Not enough information, but enough. Someone else had been here. Recently. The realization transformed the room. Moments earlier it had felt like a museum. Now it felt active. Compromised. The side corridor led deeper into the hillside. Caleb stood quietly, listening. Nothing. Only silence. But silence didn't always mean safety. He knew that better than most. Boone's ears rotated slowly, gathering sounds. The dog emitted a low rumble deep in his chest. Not fear, warning. Caleb placed a hand on Boone's shoulder. The scarred German shepherd immediately relaxed slightly, but remained focused on the corridor. Whatever was down there mattered, and Boone knew it. Together they moved forward, one careful step at a time. The flashlight beam swept across concrete walls, storage rooms, locked cabinets, old equipment. Then the corridor ended at another steel door, smaller than the hatch above. Unlike everything else in the bunker, this door showed signs of recent use. Dust disturbed, scuff marks near the threshold. Caleb's heartbeat slowed. That always happened when danger felt possible. His body became quieter, more focused, the same way it had decades earlier, the same way Boone now stood beside him. Two old veterans, still working, still searching, still refusing to quit. Caleb reached for the handle, then stopped. Something on the floor caught the flashlight beam. A cigarette butt. Fresh, no more than a few days old. Someone had definitely been here. Someone who wasn't Raymond. And judging by the footprints, they might come back. Caleb remained motionless beside the steel door. The flashlight beam lingered on the cigarette butt. Fresh, not weeks old, not months old. Recent. The realization settled heavily into the underground silence. Somebody knew about the valley. Somebody knew about the bunker. And somebody had been inside after Raymond died. Boone stood shoulder to shoulder with him. The German shepherd's ears remained fixed on the darkness beyond the door. Listening, waiting. Caleb slowly reached for the handle. The door opened inward. A smaller room appeared beyond it. The beam of his flashlight swept across concrete walls, metal shelves, storage cabinets, a workbench. Nothing immediately dangerous. But something felt wrong. Drawers stood slightly open. Boxes had been moved. Dust patterns were disturbed. Someone had searched this room recently. Boone entered first. His nose moved constantly, following scents invisible to human senses. Caleb followed. Years of military training refused to stay buried. His eyes checked corners automatically. Doorways, blind spots, possible cover, possible exits. The bunker suddenly felt less like an inheritance and more like an active situation. The room contained dozens of folders, maps, survey records, engineering reports, most untouched. One shelf, however, showed clear signs of disturbance. Several binders were missing. Empty spaces remained where something had once been stored. Caleb frowned. Why steal records? Why not take valuables? It didn't fit. Boone stopped beside a metal filing cabinet. The dog sniffed intensely, then looked toward Caleb. The same look he used during training exercises. Found something. Caleb opened the drawer. Inside sat a stack of documents. Most appeared ordinary. Land surveys, permits, water reports. Then he found something different. A county property map. Folded repeatedly. Recently handled. A red circle had been drawn around the valley. Someone had been studying it. The discovery tightened every muscle in Caleb's body. This wasn't random curiosity. This was interest. Deliberate interest. The kind that usually led to trouble. By late afternoon, he returned to the house with several boxes of journals. Martin Graves listened quietly as Caleb explained what he'd found. The attorney's expression darkened. "Are you certain?" Caleb handed him the map. Martin stared at the red circle. His jaw tightened. "I never told anyone about this place. Neither did Raymond." The attorney nodded slowly. Then someone figured it out. Neither man liked that possibility. Outside, the valley remained peaceful. Water flowed through stone channels. Birds moved through the orchard. The beauty of the place somehow made the threat feel worse. A hidden paradise only stayed hidden until someone learned its value. That evening, Caleb walked the property. Old habits, perimeter checks, observation, assessment. Boone stayed close. The dog seemed more alert than usual. Several times he paused and looked toward distant ridges. Watching, listening, the sun disappeared behind the cliffs. Darkness arrived quickly. The valley transformed beneath moonlight. Silver water, black shadows, silent trees. Caleb sat on the porch with a notebook from Raymond's bunker. The entries fascinated him. Water measurements, solar output, crop yields, 30 years of careful observation. Raymond had documented everything. Then a particular entry caught his attention. June 14. Someone asked questions in town again. Need to be careful. The line stopped him cold. He flipped backward, then forward. Other entries appeared. Different dates, same concern. People asking questions. People noticing. People searching. Apparently, Raymond had been aware of interest in the valley for years. The old man had simply never talked about it. A branch snapped somewhere beyond the orchard. Boone was on his feet instantly. His growl emerged low and deep. Caleb closed the notebook, every nerve sharpened. The sound had not come from an animal. Too heavy, too deliberate. He switched off the porch light. Darkness swallowed the house. Boone moved ahead of him, silent, focused. The two veterans advanced together, one human, one canine, both operating on instinct. Caleb stopped near the edge of the orchard. Nothing moved. The night remained still. Then Boone suddenly lunged toward the tree line. A dark figure burst from cover, running, fast. The person disappeared between the trees before Caleb could get a clear look. But the message was obvious. Someone had been watching. Watching the house. Watching him. Watching Boone. The sound of an engine echoed moments later from somewhere beyond the western ridge. Then silence returned. Boone stood at the edge of the orchard, staring into the darkness. The hair along his back remained raised. Caleb slowly approached. His eyes followed tire tracks barely visible in the moonlight. Fresh tracks. Fresh enough that dust had not yet settled. Whoever it was had been here tonight. And judging by the confidence of the visit, they planned on coming back. Caleb barely slept. The valley remained quiet after the intruder disappeared. But quiet no longer felt peaceful. It felt temporary, like the silence before a storm. Near midnight, Boone finally settled beside the front door, not asleep, waiting. The same way soldiers waited through long nights when nobody knew exactly when trouble would arrive. Caleb sat at the kitchen table with Raymond's journals spread before him. Lantern light cast long shadows across the pages. Outside, moonlight silvered the orchards and the flowing water. Inside, Raymond's handwriting carried him deeper into a life he had never fully known. The old man had documented everything: water flow, rainfall, crop yields, solar production, repairs, expenses. But mixed among the practical notes were personal entries, short observations, thoughts he never spoke aloud. One entry stopped Caleb cold. March 18. Caleb called today. Couldn't sleep again. Tried pretending he was fine. He isn't. Neither was I after the army. The boy carries ghosts. The words hit harder than Caleb expected. He continued reading. Another entry. July 2. Boone helped today. Dog knew before Caleb did. Remarkable animal. The nightmare stopped after the dog arrived. Good. Caleb stared at that sentence. The dog arrived, not adopted, not found, arrived. The wording felt deliberate. A memory surfaced years earlier. A veterans support coordinator calling him unexpectedly. A retired military dog needing placement. Would he consider taking him? At the time, Caleb assumed his name had come from some government list. Now he wasn't so sure. The next morning he returned to the bunker. Boone followed closely. The dog remained unusually focused on the deeper section beyond the storage room, the place where the fresh footprints ended. Caleb carried a flashlight and one of Raymond's maps. The underground air remained cool, silent. The steel door stood open exactly where he had left it. Boone moved ahead. His nose worked constantly. Then suddenly he stopped beside a section of wall, a plain concrete wall, nothing special. At least at first glance. The dog sniffed intensely, then pawed once at the lower corner. Caleb crouched. The concrete looked ordinary, but the floor beneath it showed faint scrape marks, recent ones. His pulse quickened. He ran his hand along the edge. Something clicked. A hidden latch. The wall shifted slightly. Behind it sat a narrow compartment, small, hidden, invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. Inside rested a metal box. Nothing else. No gold, no cash, no valuables, just a simple military-style lockbox. Boone sat immediately, watching, waiting, as though this was the destination he had been trying to reach all along. Caleb carefully lifted the box. His hands felt strangely unsteady. The latch opened with a metallic snap. Inside were 3 items: a stack of photographs, a thick envelope, and a military file bearing his own name. For several seconds he simply stared. Then he opened the file. The first page contained medical evaluations from years earlier, PTSD assessments, treatment recommendations, counseling reports, records he hadn't seen in over a decade. His throat tightened. Page after page documented the darkest period of his life. The months after Iraq, the isolation, the insomnia, the panic attacks, the days when getting out of bed felt impossible. Then he found payment records. Every treatment, every appointment, every bill paid, not by the VA, not by insurance, by Raymond Mercer. Caleb stopped breathing. He turned another page. More payments, years of them, therapy, medication assistance, specialized care. Thousands upon thousands of dollars, all paid quietly, all hidden. His vision blurred. The photographs came next. One showed Raymond standing outside a veterans rehabilitation center. Another showed a younger Boone wearing a service dog training vest. Then another, and another. Dozens of pictures. Raymond visiting, watching, waiting, always staying in the background, always helping without taking credit. Finally, Caleb opened the envelope. The paper inside crackled softly. His uncle's handwriting filled every page. Caleb, by now you've probably discovered things I never talked about. Good. Some truths need to be found, not told. You were never supposed to know about the bills, or the appointments, or the nights I sat in parking lots waiting to hear whether you'd show up to treatment. I wasn't helping because you owed me anything. I was helping because family is supposed to carry weight when one of us can't. Caleb wiped his eyes. The words continued. When you came home from Iraq, you thought nobody saw what happened to you. I did. You thought you hid it well. You didn't. The letter trembled slightly in his hands. Then he reached the final pages, and everything changed. Because there, for the first time, Raymond explained Boone. The dog wasn't an accident. The placement hadn't been random. The recommendation hadn't come from nowhere. Raymond had arranged everything. Every conversation, every approval, every payment. The old man had spent years making sure Boone ended up with Caleb. Not because Caleb needed a dog. Because Raymond believed Boone would save his life. And according to the records inside the box, he already had, several times. Boone quietly rested his head against Caleb's knee. The old German shepherd didn't know what the papers said. He didn't need to. Caleb lowered a hand onto the dog's scarred neck. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he looked back at the envelope. One final page remained unread, and at the top of that page sat a single sentence. The sentence that finally explained why Raymond had left him $5. Caleb, the $5 was never the inheritance. It was the beginning. For a long moment, the words refused to make sense. Boone remained beside him, his head resting against Caleb's knee. The old German shepherd seemed content simply being there, steady, present, the way Raymond had always been. Caleb continued reading. 30 years ago, before you ever went to Iraq, before you became the man sitting in this bunker, I stopped at a gas station outside Flagstaff. Behind the building was a military dog nobody wanted. Old handler gone. Program shutting down. Dog headed for a very short future. The old man had underlined the next sentence. I spent $5 on dog food that day. Caleb blinked. Then read it again. I spent $5 on dog food that day. The letter continued. I sat beside that dog for 2 hours. He was scared, confused, angry at the world. Reminded me of somebody I hadn't met yet. The dog eventually recovered, found a home, lived a long life. Years later, he sired a litter. One of those pups eventually became Boone. Caleb slowly lowered the page. His eyes drifted toward the German shepherd. Boone looked back, calm, trusting. unaware that his story had begun decades before Caleb ever met him. The next page trembled slightly in Caleb's hands. You thought the $5 meant, I believed you were worth almost nothing. I needed you to feel that. I hated doing it. But I needed you to understand something before you inherited this valley. People spend their entire lives letting others decide their value. A paycheck, a title, a rank, an inheritance, a number. You spent too many years believing other people's numbers. The words landed harder than any accusation ever could. Because they were true, Caleb remembered Iraq, the months after returning home, the failed relationships, the jobs he walked away from, the nights sitting alone in darkness, convinced that the best years of his life were already behind him. Somewhere along the way, he'd started measuring himself by what he'd lost. The letter continued. The day that will was read, everyone in that room assigned meaning to $5. They assumed it represented your value, and for 60 days so did you. Now ask yourself something. Who was wrong, them or you? Caleb closed his eyes. The answer hurt, because he had believed it immediately, without question, without giving Raymond the benefit of the doubt, without trusting 30 years of evidence. $5 had outweighed a lifetime of love. A knot formed in his throat. He continued reading. The valley was never the gift. The water isn't the gift. The land isn't the gift. The money isn't the gift. The lesson is the gift. Because one day somebody will try to measure you again. Maybe with money, maybe with failure, maybe with age, maybe with regret. And when that day comes, I want you to remember what happened here. The world said $5. The truth was something else entirely. Caleb wiped his eyes. Outside the hidden bunker, wind moved through the desert above. The sound felt distant, almost peaceful. The final page waited. I paid $5 to feed a forgotten dog. That decision eventually brought Boone into your life. Boone helped keep you alive during years neither of us talks about much. That same dog led you to this valley. $5 started every important thing that happened afterward. Not bad for $5. The old man's humor reached across death itself. Caleb actually laughed, a short, broken laugh, then another. Soon tears followed. Not the violent grief of the funeral, not the anger of the inheritance. Something quieter, something cleaner. The release of a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. Boone immediately shifted closer. The dog pressed against him, solid, warm, real. Caleb wrapped one arm around the shepherd's neck. You're a good dog. Boone's tail tapped softly against the concrete floor. For a while neither moved. Eventually Caleb stood. The bunker suddenly felt different. Not mysterious anymore. Not threatening. The answers had finally arrived. Most of them. Then Boone's ears lifted. Instantly, the dog froze. Every muscle tightened. Caleb recognized the change immediately. Something was wrong. The German shepherd moved toward the corridor, slowly, silently, listening. Caleb switched off the flashlight. The darkness swallowed the room. For several seconds he heard nothing. Then it came, a faint metallic sound, above them, near the hatch, not loud, just enough, someone opening something. Boone let out a low growl. The same growl Caleb had heard before danger overseas. Someone was up there, and this time, they hadn't come just to watch. Boone's growl deepened. Low, controlled, danger close. Caleb stood motionless inside the darkness of the bunker. The old instincts returned immediately. Not panic, not fear. Assessment, distance, options. The metallic sound came again. Above, near the hatch, someone moving carefully, trying not to be heard. Caleb switched off the flashlight completely. The bunker disappeared into darkness. Beside him, Boone remained perfectly silent. Years ago, during difficult nights after Iraq, the dog had learned something important. When Caleb went quiet, he should too. The staircase creaked, a faint sound. Then another. Someone was descending. Caleb guided Boone backward into the shadows near the storage shelves. The dog followed without hesitation. Together they waited. A flashlight beam suddenly appeared at the top of the stairs, moving slowly downward, searching. The person clearly knew the bunker existed. They just didn't know Caleb was already inside. The beam reached the bottom. A man stepped into the chamber, work boots, ball cap, mid-50s. Caleb recognized him instantly. Derek Mercer, his cousin. The same cousin who had smirked in the lawyer's office when Caleb received $5. The same cousin who inherited cash and assumed Raymond's story was finished. Apparently it wasn't. Derek moved directly toward the shelves. Confident, familiar. He'd been here before. That answered one mystery. Then another voice echoed from the stairs. "You find it yet?" A second man appeared. Younger, stranger. Probably hired help. Derek shook his head. "It's here somewhere." Caleb listened quietly. The conversation explained everything. The county water records, the missing documents, the surveillance. Derek had figured out the valley might be worth something. And once money entered the equation, he couldn't let it go. Some people never could. The younger man kicked at a box. "You sure this place is worth all this?" Derek laughed. "Live water rights in Arizona?" He shook his head. "You have any idea what that means?" The answer sounded almost identical to something Martin Graves had said, except Raymond had seen water as life. Derek saw it as a price tag. The difference mattered. Boone's ears twitched. The younger man glanced toward the shadows. For one dangerous second, Caleb thought they had been spotted. Then the man turned away. The moment passed. Derek continued searching, opening drawers, pulling files, growing frustrated. Finally, Caleb stepped forward. "You won't find what you're looking for." The reaction was immediate. Both men jumped. The younger man stumbled backward. Derek's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Caleb." His voice cracked. For a moment nobody moved. Then Boone stepped beside Caleb. The German shepherd emerged from the darkness like a silent warning, scarred. Alert, protective. Derek visibly swallowed. "You've been following me." It wasn't a question. Derek looked away. That answered enough. The confrontation that followed was surprisingly brief. No shouting, no dramatic threats. Just the slow collapse of a man's excuses. Derek claimed he deserved answers. Claimed Raymond had hidden things from the family. Claimed everyone should share the valley. The words sounded hollow even to him. Eventually, Caleb simply asked one question. "How much is enough?" Derek didn't answer. Because there wasn't one. There never had been. Silence filled the bunker. Finally, the younger man shook his head. "I'm done." He walked toward the stairs, left without another word. Derek remained, looking smaller than Caleb remembered. Not evil, just trapped. The same way some people spent their entire lives trapped by numbers. Eventually, he left too. No threats, no lawsuits, no promises, just disappointment. And strangely, that felt sadder. Hours later, Caleb sat beside the spring. The valley glowed beneath late afternoon sunlight. Water moved quietly through the channels Raymond had built. Boone rested beside him. A white bandage still covered the healing scrape on the dog's shoulder from a recent accident, climbing the rocky ridge several days earlier. Nothing serious. But the sight reminded Caleb how much the dog had done. How many times Boone had protected him, guided him, saved him. The old German shepherd lifted his head, watching dragonflies move above the water, completely unconcerned with money, ownership, inheritance, or pride. The simplicity felt profound. Martin arrived shortly before sunset. After hearing everything, he sat quietly for a long time. Then he smiled. "You know what Raymond would say?" Caleb shook his head. Martin looked across the valley. "He'd say that the test wasn't you inherited this place." A pause. "He'd say the test was what you did after." The words stayed with Caleb. That night he walked through the valley alone, past the orchards, past the solar arrays, past the flowing spring. Everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of Raymond's patience. 30 years of work. 30 years of tending something bigger than himself. Near midnight, he stopped beneath the cottonwoods. The breeze moved through the leaves overhead. The sound reminded him of distant rain. For the first time since Raymond died, Caleb felt completely still inside. No anger, no need to prove anything, no need to win. The valley had already answered every question that mattered. And standing there beneath the trees, he realized something else. He knew exactly what he wanted to do next. Not sell it, not hide from it, not protect it only for himself, something better. Something Raymond would understand immediately. Beside him, Boone slowly stood, the old dog stretched, then leaned gently against Caleb's leg, as if he already approved of the plan. 3 years later, the valley was no longer a secret place built for one man. It had become a place where broken people learned how to breathe again. The transformation happened slowly, the way all worthwhile things seem to happen. One repaired building at a time, one planted tree at a time, one conversation at a time. Caleb never turned the valley into a business. Raymond would have hated that. Instead, he turned it into something far more valuable. A refuge. A place where military veterans could come for a few days, a few weeks, or however long they needed. No advertisements. No grand opening, no publicity. Just word of mouth, one veteran telling another. A quiet network spreading across Arizona and beyond. The old adobe house became a gathering place. The bunker's records remained preserved. The orchards expanded. The solar array continued feeding power into the grid. And every morning, the spring still flowed through the valley exactly as Raymond intended. The first veterans who arrived reminded Caleb of himself. Men and women who scanned doorways automatically, who sat with their backs to walls, who woke at 3 in the morning after dreams they couldn't explain. Nobody needed to explain anything there. Everyone already understood. Sometimes healing looked surprisingly ordinary. Repairing irrigation pipes, planting trees, fixing fences, working beside people who didn't ask unnecessary questions. Boone became the heart of the valley. Visitors recognized it immediately. The old German shepherd moved from person to person with uncanny instinct, always finding the veteran having the hardest day, always sitting beside the one trying hardest to hide it. Nobody knew how he did it. He simply did. The years added gray to his muzzle. The scar on his shoulder remained visible beneath his coat. His pace slowed. His hearing softened, but his purpose never changed. One autumn afternoon, Caleb stood beside the spring, watching a group of veterans replace an irrigation gate. Laughter drifted across the valley. The sound still surprised him sometimes. For so many years, he had associated silence with survival. Now he understood something Raymond had known all along. Healing could be quiet, but it didn't have to be lonely. Boone rested nearby beneath a cottonwood tree. The dog slept more these days. Earned it too, Caleb smiled. You've done enough for one lifetime. Boone opened one eye, then went back to sleep. Late that winter, a pickup truck rolled through the gate. Caleb noticed it immediately. The driver looked young, early 30s, military posture, recently separated from service, if Caleb had to guess. A black Labrador sat in the passenger seat. The dog wore the familiar vest of a retired military working dog. The sight stopped Caleb in his tracks. The truck parked near the house. The young veteran stepped out first. The Labrador followed. Both looked uncertain. Both looked exhausted. Caleb remembered that feeling. The man approached. "Are you Caleb Mercer?" "I am." A long pause followed. Then the younger veteran nodded. "I was told this place might help." Caleb glanced toward the Labrador. The dog remained pressed close against its handler, protective, loyal, watching everything, just like Boone once had. "What's his name?" "Ranger." The Labrador's tail moved once. Caleb smiled. "Good dog." The young veteran looked around the valley. The water, the orchards, the cottonwoods, the mountains beyond. His expression softened slightly. For the first time since arriving, he seemed able to breathe. Caleb reached into his pocket. The old iron key rested there, the one marked with the brass tag, the one Raymond had left behind. He turned it over in his hand, thinking. Then he held it out. The younger man looked confused. "What is it?" "A key." The veteran laughed softly. "I can see that." Caleb nodded toward the valley. "Some things have to be opened yourself." The younger man accepted the key, not understanding yet, but willing to try, exactly the way Caleb once had. A breeze moved through the cottonwoods. Water whispered over stone. Somewhere nearby, Boone slowly rose from beneath his tree and walked toward them. Older now, much older. His movements carried stiffness. His muzzle was nearly white, but his eyes remained the same. Steady, wise, present. The old German shepherd stopped beside Caleb and leaned gently against his leg, the same way he always had. Together, they watched the young veteran and ranger walk toward the spring, toward the water, toward whatever came next. As evening settled across the valley, Caleb found himself sitting on the porch Raymond once imagined he would inherit. The sky burned orange above the desert cliffs. Long shadows stretched across the orchards. Boone lay beside his chair. The old dog rested his head on Caleb's boot. Neither spoke, neither needed to. Caleb reached into his wallet, carefully unfolded a worn bill. $5. The same bill, the same inheritance, the same lesson. For years he thought it meant he had been left almost nothing. Now he understood. Raymond had never been teaching him about money. He had been teaching him about worth, about loyalty, about patience, about the difference between value and price. The $5 bill disappeared into a small wooden box sitting beside the chair. The same box Raymond had built years earlier. Caleb closed the lid, looked across the valley. The spring shimmered in the fading light. The cottonwoods swayed. The solar panels reflected the last rays of sunset. And beyond it all stood the hidden desert that once seemed empty. A place that had been transformed by one stubborn old man, one loyal dog, and one lesson worth more than any fortune. Caleb reached down and rested his hand on Boone's neck. The German shepherd sighed contentedly. Then Caleb looked toward the horizon and smiled. "Yeah, Raymond." The wind carried softly through the trees. "Now I understand." The valley glowed green against the red desert beyond. And for the first time in a very long time, everything felt exactly where it belonged. The valley glowed green against the red desert beyond. Not the money, not the inheritance, not even the valley. Sometimes the most valuable things in life are the things no one else can put a price on. A loyal dog, a second chance, a place to heal, or one person who believes in you when you've stopped believing in yourself. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. If you believe loyalty is worth more than money, leave a simple 1 in the comments. And if you've ever had a dog that changed your life, leave a guy. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd truly love to hear your story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There are many more powerful stories waiting for you here. Stories about courage, loyalty, second chances, and the extraordinary bond between people and the dogs who never give up on them. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and never let anyone else decide what you're worth. We'll see you in the next story.